the red flag flying here.
Hello and welcome to Socialist Night Live. It's really good to have you here, whoever's here. Don't forget to give this a share. Today we are here with two of our normal Socialist think tank team and also someone who's been on the show before, Tina McKay. So I'll go around and I'll do it, you know, in any order. Tell you what, Rochelle, how are you doing?
Hey, all right, I'm good, thanks.
Excellent. What have you been up to?
Well, it's been the last day of term today. Last day of term. I gave none of my students homework, which is a good thing, I think. Just happy to have a week away from screens. Ironically, she says, to a screen.
That's how we all feel, I think. But yeah, we're back to the screen straight away. And Tina, hi, how are you doing?
Not too bad. Good to see you again.
Excellent to see you as well. So have you been up to anything or just trapped in the house? Or
Yeah, but bit of trapped in the house and just trying to work through the readings for the Socialist Sunday School tomorrow, you know. So yeah, eyes are tired.
Oh yeah, it's pretty exciting. That's a pretty exciting way to spend Valentine's Day, isn't it? It's very, very romantic to do some political education.
Yeah, look, I'm an anti-Valentine's person anyway. My husband gets the same card every year, and then I just put it back in the envelope and store it away for the next year. I'm so romantic.
James, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Not so bad. That's what you've been up to. Didn't expect that. Actually, that was interesting about Neil's thing. He was the first person ever to ask me a question in the middle of it. So
really?
Never done that.
That was the first time.
I think it's the first time anyone's ever asked me a question. But yeah. So anyway, what you been up to?
Nothing much other than having a very eventful night with the children. It was very hard to get them to sleep. Other than that, it's just general picking up the councillor stuff. Trying to get that moving within the Labour Party, basically. Get things moving on social media.
Yeah, you do loads on that, don't you? Like kind of social media for a lot of County Durham, certainly all of Easton, aren't you?
Oh, well, I give advice. I don't do it. I've got my own. It's East Durham Make a Difference, which I started, and I do a lot of that. And then I obviously do the stuff in the social media and IT for Easton CLP, and I do IT related stuff for a Socialist think tank as well.
Excellent. Thanks for that, James. We've already got some chat things in, so I'm just going to quickly go over to the little chat box. It's probably too small to read that now that I think about it, but we've had Leanne Powell saying hello and Isa Carr saying welcome everyone today. Baz, do you think socialism will ever prevail? Do we think socialism will ever prevail?
Not in the Labour Party anyway.
Not in the Labour Party, Rochelle?
I says you've got to have hope at some point, haven't you?
That's the only way it's going to prevail, isn't it? With hope. Lauren McHugh, good evening, and Maureen James, and Maureen's lovely, really lovely. Everyone's lovely, but Maureen's really lovely. And Mark Lungley hasn't done the reading yet, so he's a bit behind. Like, just listen to the audio. Just listen to the audio that I recorded. It took hours.
Seriously, that Hal Draper is going to take you near a fortnight to get through. I'd get listening now.
Yeah. Just put it on maybe 1.5 speed. Make me sound like a Smurf.
That's a dig at me, by the way. Inside joke, just let you know. It's the only way. There was a lot of gaps because he's reading. People read a lot slower when they're reading on a podcast. I've found, and I just really didn't want to listen to like 4 hours worth of material in 2 sittings. I wanted it done in one, so I was like put it on speed and a half just to get through. And as long as you like, all visual input was blanked out. Basically, I was in a dark room, just earphones in. It was quite easy. It sounded normal to me. But yeah.
Did it not make you do everything else? I was going to say, if you were listening with your headphones on and like washing up, like you'd do everything like super quick, wouldn't you? Like
picking up the tempo.
Yeah.
And just a couple more as well. Maureen said congratulations to me, so that'll be my story for today. I'm secretary of the Northeast Socialist Educational Association now, so another thing to do. But that's quite a good one. It was really interesting as well. We were talking about things, so we're probably going to talk about the Labour Party quite a bit tonight, the UK Labour Party. Because we've got viewers on from all over the world at the moment. We've got ISIS from Pakistan, and we've got, I don't know, like if you're watching or listening from somewhere in the world, just tell me where you are. That'd be really nice to hear. So one of the ISIS saying he likes Che more here than socialism, so that's why. Maybe like in the background there. So one of the things we were all talking about, and we're all talking about how we were anti-academy, and we were certainly we had been for shutting schools in the UK, and a lot of people were repeating that line that they said when it says no ifs, no buts, schools stay open. Oh, sorry, ISIS from Bangladesh, I do apologise. But the no ifs, no buts that Keir Starmer said about schools remaining open. Now, teachers weren't saying that for a joke, weren't saying that schools weren't safe because they thought it was funny or because they were lazy. It's harder to teach from home, but you can see it. If you look at the graph, you can see that when schools are open, the COVID cases go through the roof, and now we're seeing thousands of deaths a day because of it. That's not a no ifs, no buts case. It should have been safely. That should have been the case. Schools are about 50% open at the moment, and cases have fallen. So obviously it was a concentration problem. It's impossible to socially distance in schools as they were open. So partially open schools with some learning from home and some learning in person actually does work. So why didn't we go for that model? Why wasn't the Labour Party pushing that? Anyone got any opinions on that?
I think Keir Starmer is trying to pitch himself as not being, in hock with the unions, that he's supposed to be a leader in his own right. And that's another discussion about whether we think he actually is, although I would say no straight away without discussion. But I think, because he didn't want to be painted in the press as being, the lefty who was, steered by unions, although I don't think there's anything negative in that. The unions are people who represent the workforce, they represent the sector. And the teaching unions aren't just about the teachers' safety, the NEU in particular, who did come out on this. It's about all of the staff, but it's about the children, but it's also about the community as well. And that's the good thing about unions. They aren't just focused on one thing. And I think he just didn't want to be seen and painted in the press or in any, media as being, under the thumb of the unions when, we are the party, or supposed to be the party that's the representatives of the unions and the workers,
Yeah, they like to think that the unions are this external body that don't have anything to do with things, but unions are people who work in a place. And it brings me back to Kate Green came to our regional conference, and Kate Green's the Shadow Secretary of State for Education who replaced Rebecca Long-Bailey, who had been doing, in my opinion, a really good job. She was absolutely sound in that role. And she came along, and it was a room full of teachers. It was a virtual room, but a room full of teachers. And she came along and told us what teachers think. She was saying, oh, well, teachers have been telling me this. And like, well, we're trying to tell you this. She was like, well, no, but teachers have told me this. Like, we're all teachers. Stop it. Stop telling us what we think.
Oh, And, you weren't the right type of teacher, though?
No, because she'd been speaking to one person in her constituency, which meant more than all of the delegated representatives from the Northeast. And at a time, it was a Democratic delegation. We're all there to represent people. And she's like, no, not you, teachers. James had a fun time in education, didn't you? What do you think?
I had a very exciting time in education. I just think it's shambolic, to be honest, as usual. It's kind of just a signatory of the current state of affairs, both in British politics in general, I think. And I do completely agree with Tina that the current leadership is very much trying to pivot themselves as not bound to unions in that respect, and trying to show a stern face to the unions, tell them no, and then try to look for different forms of income, and then realize, oh no, nobody, and then run back to the unions later. That seems very, very, very much what's happening right now. And my opinion on schooling, I just think we need to have a rethink and get more teachers in there. Under the current circumstances, I just think there needs to be more resources available for, especially like class sizes are huge now in comparison to even when I was at school, and how many teachers have to deal with how many students, that type of thing. Like the ratio is a lot wider now. And I think that needs to be resolved. Durham County Council didn't help in that respect, but and while I was growing up, that is, because I particularly remember that happening while I was in a pupil referral unit. So the assistant teachers inside of the rooms, they were all like going on strike, and there was a big thing in Durham County Council at that time for that.
Rochelle, you are going to be a higher quality candidate, aren't you, a la David Evans? So you're sitting for you're standing for county council, aren't you? And you're having your social media trolled and things, aren't you? Because that's the way things work. So you're a teacher, and I'm sure you've got an opinion on whether or not schools should be open. But we'll ask you for your direct opinion on the Labour Party on this one, because that's not particularly fair on you at this time. But what do you think about what's going on in schools?
You know what I think is really strange? The fact that you've got all of these people in unions, and everyone in a union, everyone in the teachers' union is, funnily enough, a teacher or a support worker or somebody who works in schools. And the people who, live these experiences, it is their job to go in and teach those kids. And everyone else seems to tell them that they're wrong. Their opinions are wrong. That's not happening. Oh, is it not? So my yesterday didn't count. Like, it's bizarre. It's almost like we only count when, we're key workers and we do this and we do that, but don't ask us how our day was. Heaven forbid, we tell you that schools aren't safe and there's too many kids in the class, or schools aren't closed. Just ask us those closed questions, not those, the big questions, the open questions, the how could, the why should, that should be asked. It's madness. And you'll notice they've not once thought, we'll get like a working party together, we'll get assistant heads, we'll get teachers, we'll get any form of body from schools, and we'll ask them what they think is the best way to open schools. They've not once done that. I don't know in any company where people would make a decision without going and asking other people what they thought. Where's the research?
I think it's mad. They've had over a year now of this virus, and there's just been absolutely no planning on anything whatsoever. And you think, we're a year down the line and they're now only talking about quarantine hotels. It's like, I'm sure other countries were doing this time last year, Yeah. It's like, if you got a whole, like you're talking about getting, a working body of teachers together, which would be sensible, and you get the unions together, that they could have come up with a plan of how education could have been delivered in a much better way. But that's what I would have expected the Labour Party to be saying. And that's where my anger comes from, that Keir, or should I give him his proper title, Sir Keir, has done nothing but say, I support the government. Whatever the government do, I support. And, he could have been standing there saying, let's get a group together, let's do this, and let's not let our children, our teachers and our communities down. And that's where my anger comes from, that there was an alternative and he's chosen not to do it for, optics or whatever, whatever focus group has said, to do whatever. And it's not the right thing to have done. And yeah, I think, everybody's been let down with this really poor approach.
That's, yeah. Totally agree. But we had a question in about Brexit as well. It's like, so we're still scratching our head about Brexit. Any impact of socialism there? So the type of Brexit we got, I would say, wasn't really. It wasn't a socialist Brexit. I'm not saying that there couldn't have been a socialist Brexit, There could have been a Brexit that kind of renounced what the European Union did with regards to immigrants being, patrolled in the Mediterranean with gunboats, but then we just decided to move our gunboats to the English Channel. That's how we decided. Or that's how Priti Patel decided to do it. So it's not really a socialist endeavour. It could have been, but it was probably disaster capitalist, if anything. It was probably to try and short the pound, or that kind of thing, or short against the UK.
I always looked at or hoped for a socialist Brexit, right? But really, could there ever be a socialist Brexit? That's the argument some people make about staying in the union, right? Is the whole point about socialism is deep within a collaboration. So we should be collaborating with our partners and border partners in terms of trying to at least converge on some sort of union. In that respect, yes, the union that existed was not a socialist union at its core. It was still very fundamentally capitalist. But it doesn't mean that it's the same as the same argument as people make for staying in the Labour Party. Would you not try to work from within to try and gain reform from within the Labour Party, or would you rather try and do it from outside it or by other means? And I think in this respect, what we've done as a nation is choose another alternative way than what we were bound to. But that was influenced by disaster capitalism, as you said. There was a lot of factors at play other than this the societal consciousness that was under the stress of economic damage from so much poverty and I'm not even getting the word, and it's really annoying me. Apologies.
Shall we come back here on the word there, James?
Yeah, I'll come back.
You definitely made a good point on it.
Yeah, it was just that the fact that it's disaster capitalism and societal norms and the societal stress became to a breaking point, and I do believe that everybody just pointed the finger at the EU when it wasn't the EU blame. It was the economic damage that we've had off austerity. Thank you. There's the word I was looking for the past 11 years now. And it's not just that, it's been there ever since the industrialization. It's only just been exacerbated over the last 10 years with the economic damage. That's all I'm trying to say.
I think people forget as well about the economic damage and the sort of toxic influence the UK had in the EU. Like, it was George Osborne who voted against, and George Osborne and David Cameron's government who voted against any sanctions for those people in 2008 and any bankers' bonus tax or anything like that. They made sure that the bankers were not held to account for that, and they really. So the UK had a toxic influence within the EU,
The EU would never have done that anyway, because this is where I differ from James, and I think it's more so now, I think, having looked on the sort of what the EU is. The EU is a capitalist organization. It was never going to allow socialism, and as much as I wasn't, at the time, I suppose, really, supporting Brexit, I'm actually now on the other side of it, a Brexit supporter, purely because we would never have been able to have achieved socialism if we were in the EU. The EU prevents anybody from creating socialism. That's at its core. And I think knowing, what they have inflicted upon nations such as Greece and Ireland and Italy, and will continue to do so, it's designed to make sure that socialism doesn't happen. If we had have got a Brexit, if we had have, there's a lot of ifs here. If Labour had won the election, if we had got Brexit with Labour, we could have seen, the possibility of socialism. But if you look at the agreement that the terrible agreement that Boris Johnson has signed, he has enshrined in that there are diktats from the EU and that would be more in line with the Tory party anyway, which prevent things like socialism. It prevents people from, it prevents companies, it prevents governments from stepping in whenever companies are doing not doing too well.
Competition laws and stuff like that. I'm not disagreeing that the structures are there against trying to stop a socialist society. That's what I'm saying. That was not my personal argument. I was trying to make the argument of that's what some people were trying to make the argument to stay within the EU, and I was trying to make that same comparison. That's all. It wasn't a personal viewpoint. If it was my complete right, I would prefer to have left on the Labour Green New Deal. To be honest, I think that was the way forward, especially now looking in hindsight. That is now that even Biden or somebody's elected for over in the US, and I think that Green New Deal would have been at least on the table, even with Biden. Never mind the other prospects if Jeremy Corbyn did win the election.
Yeah. Well, wasn't his oven ready deal just copied and pasted from do you remember? James will know. I don't remember the actual words that were in it, but in the final draft that he signed and put out in public on page second from the end, he had all of these computer programs that were big in the 1990s.
Oh, yeah.
What was it? And he hadn't even bothered to change them.
Yeah, it was
Netscape,
about exchange security, encryption. Basically, it was going down to something like back in the 80s. I can't remember even if it was they were explaining TSL or something like that.
Yeah,
that's it. Some sort of really basic protocol of online encryption, basically.
Yeah, that was the thing we were saying. Oh well, we better get on Alta Vista and research the best way to. That's the best way to do Brexit is to look things up on Alta Vista. But Laura, we're getting plenty of comments in, so I'm going to come to the comments now for a second. So this one. And I don't know, people at home probably can't really see that clearly, but we've had Isaac Argens asked about how do we know the subject of live from the title of a Periscope broadcast, the specific topic of the broadcast. Basically, this is just us talking. So this is just a few socialists getting together and answering questions, and we've got some general themes that will go on, but it's not really a themed discussion. It could be anything. Basically, we're just having a drink and having a talk, so it's quite nice. Some people may have noticed that the Better Daily is not on tonight. The Better Daily is going to learn the graphics at some point, I promise you, and then she can present. That'll be fun. But she's commenting a lot in the comments there. She's doing a really good job there. And there was some sort of poll about whether I need my hair cut. I'll vote yes. I think I do.
You can go like me.
Yeah, I think Laura should give you a number 2 all over.
Everyone used to think that I didn't want to do that. So one time in my school, I said, "Oh no, I'll not do that. I'll never do that. Oh, I will for charity." So I raised £700 for I think it was it for Mind or something. It was or maybe can't remember exactly which charity, but it was certainly a mental health charity, which is quite nice.
I think you should do that. I think you should.
It was cancer research. It was.
Yeah, you should put a poll up to see what charity you should go for, and then just get it all off.
Scalp myself. I won't mind do it. Actually, I really hate it, and please don't make me do such a thing.
Get the back out and all.
You could donate that. It's pretty long.
It is. Yeah.
I've got the proper head shavers. I'll show you the ones what you can buy, and they're actually quite comfortable. So you just shave it off normally with a regular shaver, and then you use that, and then grind it down. It's like grinding on your head like this.
So you basically tell me to sand my head. Just get myself sanded down. So nice just sand off my head. We've had a really cracking comment as well saying, is this time for revolution or rejuvenate according to modern socialism? I think it's time for educate.
Yeah. No, it's maybe all three.
Yeah. I don't think that people are ready for a revolution. I think the type of revolution that people are ready for is not going to cut it at the moment. They're ready for, I don't know.
Suggestion of a revolution.
Yes.
Like the idea of it. Like that's the first bit.
Persuasion.
I think well, look at the way people reacted to everything that happened politically in the UK. You've got all these awful things happening, and every time socialism's blamed, it's like, oh, it's all socialism's fault. Bloody socialism. It's like.
Do you not think as well though that I find it maybe it's an English thing, you know, and I'll probably get shot for commenting about English things, you know, with my accent at the moment. Maybe that wasn't a good phrase to use either. But do you not think it's like that stiff upper lip will just take it on the chin? Oh, I'm getting paid £3.90 an hour, but I'll just take it on the chin. You know, it's like nobody gets angry. Nobody's, you know, and this is what we need to see a little bit. And think maybe that's where, you know, Paul, you're right. And what, you know, what we're trying to do with like the political education is to get people to channel that instead of getting angry at, you know, someone who's at the same level as you or someone who's not doing well or punching down, you know, is that anger channels in through the political education to go, do you know what? Let's do something about this. Let's do something that's actually going to achieve something rather than, you know, just getting angry for the sake of getting angry.
Yep.
Yep.
Everybody,
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah,
Everyone's just nodding. Yep.
Yep.
I'm not used to people agreeing with me so much.
Oh,
There's something wrong here.
Yeah, we need an antagonizer in the group.
That's usually me, but you are all kind of just like agreeing with me.
See, this is how we're all feeling at the minute. We're getting really frustrated, and people in the chat are agreeing with you as well. So I agree, Tina. If we were French, we'd be out on the streets now. The word revolution itself is so scary through history. I think that it's a problem, though, isn't it? It's like I've made the mistake of getting Thomas Piketty's Capital and something on audiobook. It's like 40 odd hours long, and I'm like halfway through. But there's some really interesting things about what happened over time and why revolutions happened and stuff, and the power of capital. And capital's like the only time capital really started to fail was during the wars when they had no choice. They were like, well, if we're going to win this war, we're going to have to do socialism. We're going to have to do socialism because that's the only thing that makes sense. Do a form of socialism. Do a socialism. Yeah, that's it. I like it. I like that. Do a socialism. But they were going to do that, and then they had to do that, and then that is why the Labour government were able to bring in those reforms, because those reforms actually helped us. But it hasn't really worked out that well in the long term because capital has come back, and now wealth again is way more important than work. Far more important than work. And I think most people agree with these basic socialist principles. Work should mean more than inheritance. So if you're born rich, that shouldn't mean that you stay rich forever. You know, it's fine to be able to give your kids a good start in life and stuff. Everyone should have that little bit of stability and a little bit of a start. But, you know, that shouldn't be the reason that you stay rich for the rest of your life is because you were born rich. And if you work hard...
Or that you've got a trust fund.
Yeah, trust. Yeah, and then if you work hard, that should be rewarding, and it isn't. And I think these are the three things about socialism is those two, and the idea that we need to do it from the bottom up. People need to be involved in this, and those are the things that are hidden in socialism. That is all the right ever do is argue against those three things and make it sound like socialism's something else. Like it's like we're going to take something from you, or we're going to tell you what to do.
It always comes down to divide and rule, doesn't it? It's, you know, if you divide the masses enough, you know, the danger is waylaid and the rich keep getting richer. You know, I think that's what we've got to get more wise to as the sort of the working class, the ordinary people, the people that, you know, have the power. If we could, you know, just sort of get it together and stop being distracted. And, you know, this is why, you know, there's so much, you know, guff on TV to distract you. This is why, you know, there's so much stuff to, you know, like you look at the newspapers, or if you can call them newspapers, and you see what you're being fed as news, and it's designed to just distract and make you angry at certain things rather than looking at, you know, what the real issues are. And I just think, you know, that's why it's so good to see so many alternatives at the moment. And I think I don't know if you've spoken about this before, because, you know, worry about things like GB News that's about to start, which is going to feed the right wing exactly what they want to hear and make them more angry and, distract them even more from, what the real, not just what the real issues are, but the causes of those issues. They might talk about the issues, but they're not going to discuss how things happen, why it is this, or they're going to give, I imagine it just to be full of a load of scapegoats and, let's blame this one and let's blame that one. I don't know if any of you, have you ever seen, I have never been able to watch a full episode of it, but I think it's on Sky News or something called, is it The Pledge or something? Where there's a few of them sit around and they discuss loads of topics, a bit like this, I suppose, but not as, reactionary. And, it just feeds that, the need for people to have a scapegoat and get that reactionary sort of response rather than, looking at the real issues and presenting something as with fact rather than just sort of spin and just trying to garner a specific response.
I'm seeing that occur, and not just on just in particular groups of people. I think that's just where you see it highlighted. For in general, it's very much a concept that you, as a software developer, know full well what's happening when you're creating an online platform, that you create there's dedicated teams that create these feedback loops, you call them, where they come back around and giving you dopamine hits. So every time you like a person's page or like a person's photo, oh, what's that? And it's an algorithm to make you do it. And then you're basically linked up to this internet addiction. And it really is that bad, like psychologically and theoretically, that's what's happening in your brain. They're creating these loops on purpose, and then you're getting the feedback loops, and you can see it in the data where they're sitting in and they're being on the app longer because they're getting more interactions, etc., etc. And that's a lot to do with software development and marketing, and it doesn't just happen online. I'm seeing it happen everywhere in every fabric and space of society. This is happening. Is where you get isolated echo chambers and groups of people all around throughout societies, and then they're creating their own little feedback loops, and then this is boiling up a lot of tension, and not a lot of people are talking to each other and actually breaking down them barriers and explaining, okay, like the question what we always ask is, what is socialism, or like, what is conservatism? Like, we don't answer and respond to these questions as enough as what we should do anymore. Like it does feel like there's a lot of division. There has been for a while now, and especially in British politics. And I think that resembles a lot of the effects of all this technological advancement and constant dopamine hits, and it's the next what's the latest next thing, what's the latest iPhone, what's the latest t-shirt, what's the latest fashion. Like, it's all this type of stuff. It's just becoming a very intensified is what I'm trying to say. And I'm just trying to say, it's not just in that particular group that you were discussing, it's every group of society. I'm saying every type of community there is. I'm seeing this throughout. So I don't know personally how to solve that. I just think tech companies have way too much power. I think that plays a real big part. I don't think our society has ever had the ability to be able to communicate like we have from somebody with different opinions on the other side of the continent instantaneously. And I think there's people taking advantage of that for profit, and we need to curb it because it's really disrupting our fabric of society.
Tend to agree with that, James. Tend to agree again. We all agreed. It's like one of those meetings where everyone just like makes a speech, like, and then everyone goes, "Yeah, great." Great at the end of it. Right. So I'm now going to move on to something. I'm going to talk a little bit about patriotism. Now, we've heard a little bit about this with Mr. Keir Starmer, Sir Keir Starmer, who has decided that wearing a flag or having a flag behind him is an important thing. And one of the things, when I did an interview with Paul O'Connell from the Political Education Project, there was a lot of stuff that went on outside the conversation. So we've got clips from outside the main interview that were really, really good. This was just me and him chatting. So there's like, I think about halfway through, there's me going, no, something like really looking like an idiot. But I'm gonna whack that on and see what people think.
Obviously, the US government and the EU backed the coup against Morales and forced him from power. And then a right-wing dictatorship came into power and murdered a bunch of trade unionists and socialists and was imposing fairly draconian laws. Now, if you know the history of Latin America, you know how that script goes. You know what I mean? The sort of unions are decimated, the movement collapses, and you have a 10, 20, 30-year dictatorship that restores the status quo in some way. That didn't happen this time. Didn't happen in Bolivia, right? They bounced back within a year, won all the elections, got rid of the coup, Morales returns, sort of. Now, the reason for that is that the MAS, long before it was a political party, was a movement of indigenous groups, trade unionists, and working class organizations. And also, they have from the very start made political education a central part of what they do. So they go to the back arse of nowhere in the Andes, and they go to all the big cities around Bolivia, and they've done political education for years, right? So that when their movement was attacked in a very vicious and a very sort of calculated way, they didn't collapse and dissolve, right? They were solid, they were rooted, the foundations were right, and they bounced back. And so part of what we're trying to do with the political education project, ambitiously long term, is to build those foundations. That it wouldn't matter if there was ever another Jeremy Corbyn again. That wouldn't be important, because we'd be doing something else, and we'd build up networks of people and connections with people and an understanding of what politics demands of us and what we need to do and how we can go about it. And then we can affect that in the trade unions or at a local level in an election or whatever it is, but that we're more adequate to the next challenge that comes our way. And that's the crucial thing, you know, that's where we have to be going. And the thing about it is, it's frustrating, because as I said, I'd love a general strike tomorrow. I'd love us all to be able to be, I'd love to be at that tipping point where we're getting ready to seize sort of government buildings and everything else, but we're nowhere near it. I mean, most of us can barely maintain strikes in our workplaces, let alone the general strike. so we just have to do this as much as the impulse is to fucking, because again, we all understand the scale of what's happening. I mean, as much as the impulse is to get stuff done now, we have to take that moment. And I think another example I sort of like referring to is Lenin at the outbreak of World War One. He's in a library in Switzerland reading Hegel at the outbreak of World War One. He's not straight to the barricades in Moscow or anywhere else, because we do need that period of reflection and that period of clarifying our understanding. Not again coming up with the answer and going, here's what we need to do, go and do it, but to have these conversations and to see what works in Britain as well. I mean, this is one of the things, Lisa and Andy and people like that are cynically talking about British values and blah, blah, blah. I always say that what the left should be doing in Britain, what we have to be doing, is not going, oh, that's racist, the dog whistle, and it definitely is, and they're definitely cynical, but we have to be celebrating the radical British tradition, and we have to be taking socialism and vernacularising it, making it a common sense in Britain today, linking it up to this history of sort of, as you mentioned there, the cafes, you know what I mean, the sort of mutual aid and support, unsung heroism of working class women and working class communities, the miners, the libraries, all these traditions that we have in Britain and we all draw upon, we have to celebrate that. So when they say, yeah, British values or British tradition, go, yeah, that's what I'm interested in. That stuff. Let's build on that. And that's the foundation, part of the foundation we have going forward. Because you have to give people a sense of hope and sort of purpose as well.
So, I forgot to take off the little bit of music at the end there. But, so, any thoughts on that? Anyone who wants to come in? Rochelle, any thoughts on what we were saying there?
Sorry, I was reading that really long comment that Anthony's put on. That,
I haven't been able to read that yet, so bring it.
I know,
bring in,
I was going through it. I was listening and I was reading at the same time. I feel really bad now.
That's okay. I know Tina's got something to say about this.
Oh, well, I've got something to say about everything, haven't I? I think, I see, I'm 100% in agreement, with what Paul's saying there, but just to bring it back a little bit to the sort of superficiality of what Keir Starmer's doing. And I think, not only has that been sort of picked up by, everybody, on the left and certainly within the wider sort of electorate, is that there's no substance to anything. It's just, wrap yourself in the flag, and that's you being, I love the country, and that's being, patriotic. And I just, I think maybe, my sort of upbringing, in Northern Ireland, sort of offers a different insight to the representative sort of what Keir's trying to do with flags. And so for me, there's a sense of, the Union Jack, it can be an exclusionary flag. It doesn't encompass, everybody in the nation or in the UK, whichever he's talking about when he says, the nation, because is he talking about Northern Ireland? Is he talking
Well, he
about
usually
people
says
in
Britain.
Scotland?
He usually says
Yeah.
Britain, which doesn't include Northern Ireland. So
Yeah, and this is the thing, and there's not only that, but if you go back to when you had the racists, who in the 70s and 80s were there's no black in the Union Jack, and many people, it's not a flag doesn't represent just a nation of the time. A flag, represents a lot of the history and how the flag was used, and I think it can be really. It's not just about being PC, and it's not about trying to be, what they would call the right, using the term woke. It's not. It's about looking at the substance of something, and I think for me, patriotism has nothing to do with what flag that you drape yourself in. Patriotism is how much you want to look after the people within your nation, how much you want to make sure that your nation leaves no one behind. And yes, that is the socialist approach, but isn't that, what anybody who is a true patriot, if you want to use the word, is someone who wants to make sure that the systems within a nation are fit for everybody, and to make sure that everybody is looked after. And I just don't like this superficial, and Paul's right, what he talks about, the blue Labour approach, which is sometimes, I think it kind of fetishizes what the working class are. This image of, oh, we're all, everybody's, flat cap and, white working class, and, there's nothing else but that. And everybody, maybe smokes a pipe and drinks a pint down in the working man's club, and the working class tradition is so much more than that. And I think that's what Paul is tapping into. And, looking at, if you go back into the 70s and 80s, in Belfast, through the Troubles, the women were really strong advocates, in their communities, and, really were relied upon and did an awful lot. I think if you haven't looked into it, it's certainly something to look into. But I think all that rich tradition of the working class, what we should be proud of, as all nations within the UK, is what the working class has achieved through being communities and looking out for each other. And all that gets lost by just a superficial, let's wave a flag, or let's have a flag behind me. And, we're not America, and this is what they're trying to do, is if like, oh, you should be, proud. If you're not proud of the flag, you're not proud of your country. And I just think that's a load of shit, And I think, I'm not, you're not in any way saying you're not proud of a country by not flag waving. I just think that, there's an awful lot to that. And as I say, growing up in Northern Ireland, where flags are painted on curbstones, and, different flags represent different things, it's so inane, it's banal, it's not, anything other than a cheap way to, sort of upset some people, but gain what they think is another. I think it's patronizing to think that there's a lot of voters that will just say, oh, isn't that marvelous? Keir loves his country because he's waving the Union Jack. And I just think it's insulting, really do, when there's so much more that you could make sure that you're doing to reflect patriotism. I was trying to, but while you were talking, I was trying to go through, because there's a tweet, and I've shared it quite a few times actually, from Jeremy Corbyn, when he talks about what patriotism is. And I can't get it now while I'm talking. I'll probably get it at, about 3 o'clock in the morning or something.
I know the one. It's a good one. I was just interested in what you were saying there about growing up in Northern Ireland and what flags mean. And one of the interesting things that you sent me that video which was about the flags, and
flag.
and And the interesting thing about me was when they said that the people who supported, a united Ireland then took on the Palestinian cause. Then in retaliation, the people who wanted to unite with Britain, stay in Britain, kind of took on the Israeli flag, and that was really weird. And we've seen that happen. Like, we say, so if you go on an anti-racism march, we often see the Israeli flag waved, and I don't think those people have any care for Israel. If they bring an Israeli flag to when they're being racist and they're carrying an Israeli flag, and I know Tommy Robinson's very into the Israeli flag. It's just really interesting what a flag can do, and whether Israeli people would be proud of the fact that a known racist is waving their flag.
Certainly not. But I think in the terms of Northern Ireland, that's basically in the sort of terms of occupied territory. So the occupied territory, that's where the link to the Palestinian flag will be versus the Israeli flag. But I think that flags can they become symbols, but it's so many other it's like anything, any signifier. We put our own connotations onto things. But for me, I think it's just more. I just find it, it's distasteful to do what he's done, and I don't think I have no problem with people if they want to wave a flag. But the leader of the Labour Party, should be trying to be inclusive, and not exclude people, but also be, just be a bit more. I just think, it does smack of someone who sat in a, in a focus group and being told that if you do this and you do that, you'll get loads of people in the north to vote for you again. And I just think it is really patronizing. You guys are in the area that, that he's trying to woo back in. Are you, sort of impressed by that approach?
No, I'm not.
We wooed.
I do think it does have some sort of connection to people, and this is where you're on about where you say he sat in focus groups, and then that's where he's heard it from. Not him, but obviously the teams around him, etc. In respect to patriotism, I can see it from my perspective. I'm gonna try and see a little bit about mine. So when I was growing up, it was just little things like you're on about flags as symbols, that type of thing. And at the time of like deindustrialization, when I was growing up, where there wasn't a lot of economic prosperity, that type of thing, little events like the World Cup, for example, was like extremely big in our area. We would all, literally the whole of our street on Station Road in Easton Colliery, right, would have English flags all the way from top to bottom. Not even kidding. It was crazy for stuff like that. And then we would bring out our TVs on the front of the road, and we'd have a huge party. It was about 60 of us, that type of stuff. And then you would have like coronation events and stuff like that. They were still really big in our area. So in respect of bringing out patriotism, I think there is a sense of community involved there, whereby it's engraved into particular regions of the country, especially those that have served in military backgrounds, and also it's just those. It is actually mainly those who have either been in very poverty-stricken areas or military backgrounds that end up having a lot of patriot characteristics in their communities, is what I'm trying to explain.
But there's nothing wrong with that. But does a flag?
No, I'm not saying it does. I'm just trying to go through just a quick thing. So just to explain the context of it all. So like we've got like statues and monuments, and then these places are very, like actually quite new in our area. So like seeing you've got like Tommy the statue of World War One. And then like you've got other memorials like all the cenotaphs and stuff, and like I go around and I do videos for for a few people, and then go and do stuff like that relating to like memorials and stuff. In particular events like Remembrance Days and stuff like that. So in usually the flag is very involved because it is symbolic, right? And And when I've seen, I can see the focus groups understanding of how that can represent particular groups, but they are not that stupid. The working class is not that dumb. They know that's what their people. That's what they know. That's what's happening. It's been highlighted. They've all of a sudden now they've got a flag in the background where like a couple of years previous they never. Oh well, big ideas. Everybody knows what's happening. I don't think nobody's delusioned about it. I've always said in my personal opinion, I don't really care if it's symbolic. If you want to have it in your background, have it in the background. It's personal opinion. Because you're going to end, if you're leader of the Labour Party, you're going to end up being leader. You're going to end up being prime minister, and you're going to have to do conferences and stuff, probably with them in the background, whether you like them or not, at national events for things like when you're going over to the US or you're trying to do diplomatic missions and stuff like that. You're still going to have it in the background, whatever, in my opinion. But I do see how that's exclusive for people like yourselves. I'm not diminishing your background for people in Northern Ireland or anything like that. I'm just saying from my type of background, I can see how it can connect in ways, but the working class in our area are not that stupid.
Yeah, but he's not delivering anything else. It's I'm totally fine if he wants to wave a flag, but he's not offering anything else. There's no other substance there. It's just as if like, oh, I'll wave the flag and that'll be fine. That's me being patriotic. And I think there's no substance behind it. And that's where the danger is, that, the cynical sort of approach of just waving a flag and people will be, oh, that's him being patriotic. And I don't think that is. I think, you need to have the substance as well. I'm fine. Wave whatever flag you want, but offer something else as well. Offer the policies, the direction. How are you going to do anything for the people of the nation? Because waving a flag I can't go down to, Tesco's and pay for my bills by waving a flag. They're not going to accept a flag, and if I'm trying to pay for, rent or whatever it is I'm doing. But my quality of life will change through the policies that the government, offer. And I want to see that. And that's, there's nothing there other than the flag.
I want to see that more than anybody else, just as much as you do.
Oh, no, I agree with you. I just think he's not, his approach, it's just...
His focus is trying to win over people to win their election and then do something when he gets there. And I think personally, there's no clear plan after they get in. It's all about electioneering at the moment to make sure they can try and reach as many people to get as many votes to get them in, and then wing it from there. That's the way I see it at the moment, because he's not offering a clear vision, as you said.
I think the thing with symbols is you can't force a symbol on people. The people back a symbol up as a collective, and it becomes this organic thing where, like, as a developmental, it's like Prince. Remember when Prince changed his name to a symbol? Doesn't work, does it? Like, the people choose.
Apart from
the
he
symbol
made a cool guitar out of it, though.
Well, there is that as well.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. But telling people to like something doesn't work, and it's the same with symbols. Like, people will pick their own symbol because that's what they want, and they're not going to follow. I don't know.
Yeah, I get where you come from there. It's that emptiness, isn't it? It's what it means. If you are patriotic, what are we patriotic about? Are we proud of, there's a mixed history of everyone. There's like, people think certain things about Churchill. People think Churchill was a great wartime leader. They don't really take into consideration what Attlee did at that time. They don't take into consideration that the UK wasn't really acting anywhere near alone. Like, there was the USA and there was the Russia, and the UK was sort of almost like, a really huge, important part of that geographically and what the people did, but physically, with bodies and things like that, wasn't necessarily the same impact, and certainly not money-wise. And then the loans that they took out with the USA, there's all this context that people are like, oh, no, it was just Churchill. He just came out, stuck two fingers in the air, and everyone was like, yay, and then we won because of Winston Churchill. And that really isn't, that's just silly. It's childish, isn't it? He also did some awful things, like say about Tony Pandy, or send the rats back down the holes, or to miners, and
or I don't know, like starving India, and
genocides or I think
just add that and tick that to the list. Yeah.
So he wasn't like this heroic figure necessarily, but people don't think of that in context. But I think Starmer would like us to just be like, no, hang on, would you shut up about Churchill and just say Britain's great and we won 2 world wars and 1 World Cup? I think that's what Keir Starmer would prefer us to do, and but it's nonsense, and we know that we know too much to just accept that kind of thing.
He's also coupled it with this kind of approach to big up, the support for armed forces, but not doing it in a way that is about, the well-being and welfare of people in the armed forces. My husband's in the army, and I was really happy to see, the approach that the last leadership did. The pledges that they made to the armed forces were really good and were actually really popular as well. A lot of people really supported it. If they could get past, the what they were being fed by the media, but there was an awful lot of interest in that because it was about raising people's living standards. And the one thing that I really sort of take away from the approach that was before was that, the thing about socialism and the approach that Jeremy sort of tried to put into things was that there's no one part of the community that should come before any other. We should all be, if everybody does well, if everybody's provided for, we all move forward. And this is where, I think that here's trying to do the shortcut, like you say, James, to get to the destination, which is, if I please this group of people and I please that group of people, I'll get to A and B, or, I'll get from A to B. But really, if you try to do something for everybody, which is, it is quite easy. It's not that whole people pleasing thing. It's if you create policies that make living standards better for everybody, you'll be seen as being sincere. You'll be seen as being, authentic, and you will actually be seen as being patriotic because you're treating everybody like the valued citizen that you should be. But what I don't like is how inauthentic that Keir's approach is. It's about trying to, just pick certain groups of people, make them feel important, and then, I'm the patriot. And I just think that by doing that, he's actually being the complete opposite to what he says he's trying to be. And I just don't think that we should be trying to make certain elements of our communities above others, because no life is worth more than another life. We're all here on this earth. None of us chose to be here, but we should all be given an equal and fair opportunity at reaching our full potential. And what's wrong with that? And I don't need to be draped in a flag to do that either.
I don't know. Sorry, Paul.
No. I was going to bring you in there, Rochelle. It's just I was going to come to the comments, but I'll come to you first because.
Well, all I was going to say was I don't know if you know this, but in secondary school, it's a statutory right that you have to teach British values. So It's funny that you should bring them up. So I'm going to read them out word for word so I don't get any words mixed up. So British values, we've got to teach democracy, the rule of law, individual liberty, and mutual respect and tolerance for those with different faiths and beliefs and for those without faith. Wouldn't that have been a better strategy than just waving the flag around to actually talk about those British values that we meant to teach in school, that we do teach in school, that are a statutory knowledge, every child should go away and understand this and understand that. And I think a lot of stuff's been lost. It's all a little bit superficial. Nothing's been linked back to British democracy or the rule of law or individual liberty. I haven't heard any of that mentioned. It's just been my flag's bigger than yours.
And also, we really have a democracy, and do we have liberty? But that's maybe a debate for you to have in your next week's talk, because we'll be here all night on that one.
That's a big one, but yeah, I'm into that debate. That's a good debate.
I'm going to have that if you want that.
Yeah, maybe in a second. I just want to come back to the chat for a second. So we've had a few different comments over time, and Twitch is always good for comments because it's mainly not people who are from the UK, and it's mainly not people who are in agreement necessarily with us. So it's
They're
quite
good
fun to see.
challenges, and I like good
Yeah.
challenges.
So someone, Super Patzer 2 said, socialism is the philosophy of failure, the creed of ignorance, and the gospel of envy. I would say that if you listen to what we've actually said, this isn't. I hope we've answered that one, because we are just saying.
Tina's
that
literally
we-
crying.
It's really funny. It's really funny because like what we've talked about is making sure that people, including us, are educated. Like, none of us think we know everything. We've stated that. We're saying that we want to learn more. And we're not envious of anyone. We want everyone to feel the same, and we want people to be brought up. We're not saying, oh, we want your car. So
But everyone needs to agree with me, and that's democracy.
Yeah.
Tesla, mate. I just want your Tesla for one day. I swear I'll give it back.
there was this cracking thing before. Can you remember what was it called? It was Ponderland with Russell Brand. If you ever
yes.
it was absolutely brilliant a few years ago, and he did this thing, and they interviewed someone. They went, "Who do you think should be able to vote?" And it was just like he'd just look at old documentaries and stuff, and it was like, "Well, it should just be me and a few of my friends." This fella, it wasn't Russell Brand who
We're
said
not
it.
much further than that. We really are not much further than that with the establishment, you know.
No,
They all
and a couple.
come from the same class, right? They all come from the same school. They're all educated in the same way. They're all put through the same system.
And I've got another one about, we need a $30 an hour minimum wage. 15 isn't enough. I would continue working at Starbucks, but only if I get paid more. I don't know whether that's someone taking the piss or whether that's someone telling the truth. I don't really know the context.
Yeah, well, I think he was just talking about in general, what's the minimum hour wage, right? And I said this before, I did not feel comfortable or anywhere near not living month to month until I earned around, say, 23 to 30,000 a year. It's between that region that I felt really comfortable, that I was able to, you know, if the car broke down, I can go get it repaired, and I wasn't really like worrying about, okay, how am I going to make next month's rent because I had to pay out for the car. That started happening around like 23 to 30,000. So in that's on average about, what is it, £20, 25?
Yeah, I think it's about 20 quid an hour, isn't it?
I think that's probably, I would say that people do deserve to have enough money to live, and it depends on your costs and stuff.
Like
so that might not be enough for someone. If you're living in a big city, you know, that is, you know, a minimum requirement, and people are making a lot of money out of your profit, out of the profits they make from you, out of your labour. So you should share that. But I really don't know enough about the exchange rate and the person's background to comment on that. I don't know whether it's because I've seen some people making flippant comments about, like, people thinking, oh, well, you know, you only deserve this much for being in this job. I don't think any of us think that. I don't think any of us think that advocates of a minimum wage being a living wage, really. But I don't know what that would be in that person's context.
I had this conversation with someone in my family, actually, and that, you know, it kind of surprised me at the time, where, you know, when I was talking about, you know, what people earn, you know, tax, you know, we're talking about, you know, a lot of kind of things. And I suppose I, you know, realized quite shockingly, a lot of my family are small C conservative, but it was like, well, I work hard. And that statement, that really infuriates me, because, you know, my response to that is, well, does the bin man not work hard? Does the cleaner not work hard? You know, because they don't earn a lot. And I think this is what we see a lot from the pandemic, is it's not about low skill, it's about low pay. You know, so, you know, you wouldn't be able to function if you didn't have a cleaner. You know, you wouldn't be able to function if you didn't have someone collecting your bins. These are key roles, key, you know, positions within our society. And just because you don't value them doesn't mean that that person isn't working hard enough. And then the response to that can be, oh, well, I studied hard at school. Well, maybe you were in a position to be able to study hard at school. You don't know what someone's circumstances are. And I just don't like this, you know, this notion that, you know, it kind of like comes back to this, this idea that people get in Britain, you know, and it's the same in America, that, you know, it's that American dream that if you just put in the effort and you work hard, you know, you'll get somewhere. Well, no, that's not bullshit, because effort doesn't equal outcome. you can work really, really, really freaking hard and you can get nothing at the end of it. And that's just your luck, you know. But we shouldn't be punished for that. Our society shouldn't see people fall through the cracks. It shouldn't see someone really struggle who works 3 jobs, you know, and it isn't their fault that they don't get paid well in those jobs. But yet someone like fucking Jeff Bezos, you know, can earn an absolute killing for doing what? And then, do you know what sickens me more? I think I talked to you about this at the time, Paul, was like, he's not like, oh, I'm going to be a philanthropist. Well, how about you fucking make sure that your company pays people enough and makes people like be able to go to the toilet and not have to piss in a frigging bottle? You know, it's like, it's just, the imbalance is absolutely ridiculous. I just no, you know, everybody should get, you know, rents should be at a position, you know, people's pay should be able to cover their, you know, basics of life, which is your rent, your bills, your food. You know, I don't spend a lot. I don't like to have a lot of things. You know, people don't need to be like that. That's the capitalist way of making you think you need things. But the things that you do need is a roof over your head, food in the cupboards, you know, and being able to, you know, function in life and, you know,
having a laugh every now and then.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't, you know, live to work, or you shouldn't live to work. You should work to live, you know. And I just think the imbalance is just absolutely absurd.
There's
Sorry,
something
I just got a bit angry there.
No, it's good. It's good. That's the passion. So I'm going to bring Rochelle in on this in a second, but I interviewed Ray Goodspeed, who was one of Lesbians and Gays Support the Miners, and you know, and obviously that was sort of romanticized by the film Pride, which was a really, really good film. Not exactly how it happened, and you know, there were far greater number of them, so that's why Ray's name doesn't appear in the film, for example. But yeah, he sent me the real documentary they made, and it's called Dancing in Delice. Sorry, it's called Delice, isn't it? Dancing in Delice. And if you watch that, really funny. There's a couple of things that I noticed, but one in particular with relevance to what you're saying, Tina. But they kept on saying victory for the miners. You know, victory for the miners, victory for the gays. Victory for socialism, and that's all they were saying all the time, and that was sanitized from the film. It wasn't in there, but you know. But the other thing was, they spoke to Mark Ashton, and they were like the reporters who were probably part of a very privileged class were saying, you know, why do you support the miners? What have the miners ever done for you? Like talking about gay people in general. He said, and he was like, well, they go down into a coal mine and they dig coal, so I have electricity. And you know, and that's such a powerful thing to understand that those people who maybe do the jobs that you think actually they might not be out on a gay pride march with me, but they're down in a coal mine digging coal, and I'll show you solidarity because you're being shat on by the government the same way we're being shat on by the government, and that solidarity that came from that. So, yeah. Rochelle, you're particularly excited about the Ray Goodspeed interview, aren't you? So, what do you think?
I haven't watched that other documentary. You know, I'll have to watch it later on.
Oh, it's really good.
One of the things, like my dad was a miner, and my granddad was the pit overman, not a foreman. I think he was the overman's the word I'm using. And I grew up a lot around like men down the pit. We've got a massive family where my mum's the youngest of like 9 kids. There's the 6 boys, 3 girls. So I've got like loads of male influence or like pit orientated history in the family. And it's mad because like it's not until you get older that you start asking questions about things like, oh, mum, I've been, you know, I've learned about this thing about the strikes and the miners, and like, did dad ever get called a scab? And like having those conversations and like understanding what happened, and then talking about, oh, well, you know, there was this revolution where like the gays and lesbians actually came and supported the miners and they helped them, and like having those real conversations, it's amazing that kind of stuff happened. And I love the fact that there was absolute solidarity. Like, it's amazing.
This is why I think a lot of
this
is why I like a lot of the shows what would the Socialist think tank are doing, like the Origin series and social tie series, is because you end up exploring the backgrounds of people like that, and people who actually went through it, like like Alan and others in the movement, especially people in my region anyway, that we've got a lot of people telling their stories of exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's just inspirational, to be honest, stuff like that, because I know it's not as extreme now. If we don't have people working down the pits, and in the conditions that was back then, in the states that were, but nowadays at the moment in the front lines and the key workers, like you were mentioning, Tina, earlier on, and all the frontline workers and NHS staff, they are our nowadays miners. They are the ones on the front line. They are taking the brunt of the worst, and all the health repercussions that's going to come from this. It's exactly the same as what not exactly, but in the same respect. It's just more modernized. We have better working conditions and stuff in modern society, and they are our key workers and NHS workers at the moment are definitely like the miners back then. And we need to organise a bit more. It's the same for teachers. I think teachers organising the way they did with the TUC, etc. That was exactly the type of action what we needed at that right moment in time, or else we weren't going to force the government to take the action that we needed. So hats off. I just think we need more organisation for particular groups like that, what we have now. Like, what's a union? Is unions banned in the NHS? I'm quite confused on this.
Unison in the BMA. Well, the BMA went on strike last year, and then they were evil, and then all of a sudden it was like, God bless the NHS.
Striking actions like really permissible in the middle of a pandemic. I would never agree with that, by the way. Because people's lives are seriously at risk, and I think any doctor or any professional would agree with that. I don't think strike action for the NHS is really the right move, especially in the middle of a pandemic. I'll agree with that.
I don't know. I think
be able to do it at some point.
Yeah, I think it would depend on. I think it depends on what the issue is. I mean, I think if that was the case, the government would be pushing to make sure you'd be in some form of sort of pandemic or crisis to make sure that people don't strike. And I think the whole point of a strike is that you make your absence felt. And I think we have to. I think it would be, if a workforce decide that their working conditions are so abhorrent that they need to strike, I think I would support them. But just going back to your point, I think which is really key. When we talk about the lesbian and gay support the miners, if you go back to that time, there was an awful lot of homophobia. There was an awful lot of ignorance around LGBT issues, and I think it kind of comes back to where we started the conversation, where we started talking about political education. And if we see an awful lot at the moment of certain kind of politics where people talk about no platforming, and where we shouldn't discuss certain things. Things are black and white issues. And I think for me that's a really dangerous sort of way to tackle politics, because if you shut down discussion, if you shut down debate, obviously fascists completely should never be platformed. That I'm not talking about that. But I mean, in general, what we actually stop is the learning, because, I'm not saying that every miner felt that way, but there would have been a lot of the miners in that day who weren't familiar with, the LGBT issues. But through that working together, through that common bond, and realizing that they had the same oppressor, and they, formed that solidarity together, they were able to work together, move forward, and sort of, really achieve something, which is, what the working class should be trying to do, which is further, our cause. But if we stop that, like we're doing at the moment, we're actually preventing people from gaining allies. And I think, we need to be really careful here. And I think, for me, I think that we have to not give in to the pressures of the right wing, which is to try and stop us having discussion, which is to try to stop us having debate, which also then ends up stopping people getting allies and stopping our communities linking together. And I think, education comes in an awful lot of ways. But, for me, I learn a lot through debating with someone, whether I agree with them or not. I think I learned, from their argument. And I think that's what we have to be very careful not to shut down. I think in particular, we can't see an awful lot of that of late.
I think the government at the minute, if the NHS was to strike, and again, like, they're totally within their rights to do so if they feel they need to, but not just with the NHS, with teachers, I could list a lot of jobs. They're balancing their current plan on the goodwill of other people, and the fact that they're going to make the decision. Like, for instance, I don't speak for everyone, but for me personally, like, if the decision came and they were to say, the NEU, and I'm in the NEU, and they were to say, right, Rochelle, we're going to strike on Tuesday, but I had my year 11s, and my year 11s were due an exam. Like, you've got a two-way street there, because I think, oh my God, my greater good is my year 11s and making sure they know what they're doing to pass their GCSEs and blah, blah, blah. And I do think that this government are leaning on the laurels and the goodwill of people to make choices that they might not necessarily usually make, because it's almost like a moral dilemma. And I think they've caused lots of moral dilemmas for loads of people, like restrictions. We're talking about this thing about mental well-being. You're alone. Some people are not alone. Like Laura said last week, we're in a storm, all in the same storm, and some people have got a yacht. And I do believe that, like, when they're talking about things, they are just resting on the goodwill of people to make the right decision for the good of everybody else.
But whereas
they're not making those decisions. They're not taking everybody's opinions on board. They're just making sure that the people below them make the right decisions for society to prop them up still. And it's horrendous. It can't go on any longer.
Hence, you've got all these people that are, I've seen people that have, had limbs removed, and they're now doing marathons to raise money for the NHS. No, just provide the money for the NHS. You're the government, you have the money, you can do it. And it's just trying to get us into this notion of who's a worthy citizen, and aren't they amazing that they've done this, they've done more than you, and this whole notion of resilience. I just think I could go on for an hour about that subject. Don't even start me. I'm going to stop before I go on about it.
Resilience is one of my fun ones as well. It's like, children, those children that we're forcing to do loads of exams. What they need to be taught is resilience. The ones that hate the life, is like, well, maybe they just need to enjoy the life a little bit, rather than be forced into doing something stupid.
But it's like, and it actually feeds back into the the armed forces debate. Where they recruit from, the people they recruit, the backgrounds they recruit from, and then in the end, when you maybe have an issue, it's like you just weren't resilient enough, and it's like,
that's your problem. It's you, not me.
It's Thatcher. It's the individualization of everything. If you've got poor mental health, maybe you didn't eat enough, or you didn't, healthy enough, or you didn't walk enough, or you didn't do something for yourself. Same with the armed forces, the same with everything. It's nothing to do with societal pressure. It's all to do with you didn't do something right.
Just one thing on that, on the armed forces recruitment. They literally recruited from the referral unit. I can understand why. So the majority of people in there are disadvantaged children, come from troubled backgrounds. Some of them have learning difficulties.
Very few options.
Very few options. Learning difficulties, facing prison if they're left. Basically, that's the only other option they've got left. Other than there's basically nothing after that. There's no educational prospects, etc. But the army did come in, they're swooping in. They're like, well, you can go see the world. You can do this. You can. And
go and see a field in Africa. It's the same as a field in Kenya. I'm saying they say you can go and see the world, but you can go and see a field in Africa, and go and see a field in Kenya, and go and see a field. You're still getting to see the world.
Yeah. I can understand the prospect side of it, where you're learning like what I actually applied a couple of times. So I applied for the RAF and the Army. And it wasn't the physical training or anything. It was actually my education that let me down at the end of the day, because RAF, you're up against. But I wanted to get basically in air traffic controlling, and a lot to do with electronics and stuff. So that's what interested me. But I could see from that prospect is what I'm trying to say. Some like career progression, learning skills, all of that. Not to go around, be frontline and take orders. Yeah. I think there's like the services and infrastructure to build up the frontline services is what I was interested in, not the actual frontline services. So I can see from that prospect.
I'd like to come to a couple of comments. So there are questions coming in, and people can see them on the screen. I've now worked out how to make the font massive.
Oh,
so,
it looks good, actually.
Looks all right, doesn't it? It looks okay. Better. So yeah, it's much better. People can actually read it rather than like having like one of those
like a monocle.
Magnifying glasses. Yeah, a monocle would be good. Mark Lungley, who's commented also tonight, which is all of them really high quality. For all these faults, Owen Jones hit it on the head here. Get rid of all the cleaners, rubbish collectors, bus drivers, supermarket checkout staff and secretaries, for example, and society would very quickly grind to a halt. On the other hand, if we woke up one morning to find all the highly paid advertising executives, management consultants, and private equity directors had disappeared, society would go on as much as it did before. In a lot of cases, probably quite a bit better. Now, there's actually evidence for this.
Better. We could also get on a lot better without Owen Jones's shit journalism and grifting.
Do you mean his
I wish I could high five you right now. Can we do it for the
camera? his waiting for his turn to speak or waiting for his chance to interrupt journalism. But no, there is evidence for that opinion, though. That in Rutger Bregman's book, that's where I heard it. It was about a bankers' strike. The bankers have only ever gone on strike once, and I believe it was in Ireland. And they went on strike, and no one noticed because, like, and I'm talking about the not bank managers, not people who you can access money from. I'm talking about like the speculators,
hedge fund managers, and
they packed in for a bit. Or notice the bins go on strike for a week, and you just chaos. Absolutely total chaos, absolute chaos. So I think that's a really good point. We're seeing another couple of good questions come in. Paul Smith again's on YouTube, which is nice to see you, Paul. For any strike of all workers to be successful, we'd need to neutralise the mainstream media, especially the Murdoch press. Kind of what we're sort of trying to do. I think there's far too much. The weird thing for me is working classes will go on about how they don't trust the mainstream media, and then unless it's about Corbyn, unless it's about Corbyn, and then they believe the complete nonsense about him. But they wouldn't believe like something that they said about a vaccine. It's a really weird choice.
I find it really strange that, you kind of, I mean, everybody learns about the power of propaganda in, history when you learn about World War II. Yet nobody can, not nobody, but a lot of people cannot identify propaganda when they walk into the newsagents or when they turn on the TV. You're being fed propaganda by so many different outlets and so many different things. And I think this is where, the whole importance of political education comes in, because we need to be able to see how we're being played and who we're being played by and why we're being played. The answers are all there in front of us. And I just think, what we have to do, I think what our responsibility on the left is to not, we have to bring people with us. And understand that, we're all, trying to get to the same destination. We all want to be in the same place, but we have to bring people there at their, at their pace as well. But also, I think where some politicians, and not all politicians, is that sense of urgency can sometimes appear to be where you're being patronizing and where you're being that sort of, I'm not saying they're being Fabians, but in that approach of, I'm the benevolent and I will do this for you, because you're worthy of my time to make your life better. But the left can sometimes come across like that. Whereas, that's why I think we need to be doing more at that sort of ground level, which is about, being with people, what they're, doing in their communities, what the struggles are. But if you're listening to your community, you're able to work with your community and then realize, okay, right, well, this is what we need to do to make our community better,
I find that quite funny. Sorry. You go. Sorry, I've spoken enough.
You know what? I hate to bring it back to education again, like for political education, even if we don't call it that and we just call it education in secondary school, we have to teach fake news, and we have to teach the kids how to spot fake news. What we can't do is we can't use political examples, because if we did, we'd get, I'll not go down that route, but it will be one of those things where you would get called up and say, why have you called this fake news when it's not fake news? And, it's very subjective. And so although we're trying to teach these young people across the country, they need to learn about fake news, we can't give them any specific examples, or give them you've just got to be very general, and you've got to talk about things like social influencers on Instagram. She might say this coffee is going to make us skinnier. We know it doesn't, and that's fake news, but we can't link it to real life scenarios, because if we did, we'd get hauled over the coals for it, or
it's
something.
Really bad. That's really infuriating, because the most examples actually come from the political realm.
No. You've got to be so careful in what you teach the kids, because you don't want to be seen to be teaching them not the wrong thing, but you can't favor a side. I mean, not that I would do that in school anyway. It's a completely separate entity, but you've got to be really careful. And as someone who does dabble in politics and education, and you try and not to overlap the two, but you can't help but think if the two were overlapped, it would be so much easier, and everyone would I suppose you have to try and subvert it, and get them to point it out to you in a way. You really do. I can imagine it's not the easiest, but it's certainly. Oh, I'd be sacked within a week.
I'm going to come to the comments again. So Rachel Driver is late because she's been fixing a boiler. Solidarity to you.
Hey.
She said there was a massive icicle blocking the condenser outflow. My advice there is to get an old duvet around the condenser pipe.
Yep.
And that will mean that the heat from the boiler will be trapped a little bit, even if it gets wet and minging and stuff. But that's my little advice there. But well done, solidarity to you, absolutely brilliant. Paul Smith is saying one way of neutralising the mainstream media is all the left media to unite and work with each other. I'm for that. I'm always for that. I am definitely for that on the source.
I was going to come in, but on that point though. I think Socialist think tank and others like it are basically a stamp of what we need to be replicating across all media platforms at the moment, where it should be individuals like us, activists like us, that are doing things, start up little shows like this. Although, yes, there's actually only a small number of us. There's only 4 of us who run this Socialist think tank, and to be able to get the level what we are with just us 4, I think is quite impressive. So if we can replicate that and give advice or have a blueprint or whatever to give to other people to start up and do the same type of thing, I think that's exactly what we need. We need thousands of us all throughout of everybody in the movement to be able to start little things like this. So at least like I said, 20 odd or 40 odd or 100 people, or even 5 of their friends start listening in, it's getting the word out. It's starting to talk about it properly, break down them barriers, because at the moment we kind of have them conversations. We kind of go to the pub and talk to somebody who is our lifelong best friend, but yeah, bloody hate his ideas. But you'll sit and have a drink with them all night long, and we kind of have them arguments at the moment, not disagreements and debates at the moment. We kind of have none of that, and I think I do miss it, because we're just going to sit here and boil up in our own little echo chambers and then as soon as we see each other in person, it's going to be all arguments. And
this is why I think the Tories are absolutely loving the chaos that they've created, because they have removed that ability of communities to come together and organize. But it becomes where I kind of worry about what's going to come forward. I mean, how many pubs are going to reopen? How many community spaces are going to reopen? Where are we going to be able to organize? Will they will they remove the laws which prevent us from protesting, which prevent us from gathering in spaces? These are the things that I genuinely worry about, because they've removed those, but they haven't said they're going to give us them back. That they could choose not to. Where's the opposition going to be on that? Are we going to be, is this the moment then where maybe we are going to get together and say, do you know what, I've had enough, because if you remove people's right to organize, it becomes very much easier to continue to control and make life really hard for people. And, it's worrying. I genuinely do think it is worrying for how we move forward as to, what is the state of things going to be whenever we do come out of this pandemic.
This links in with Laura's question, which was, how do we cut through to people having an already impossible time to empower them to know that they have a voice and it is worthy of hearing? How do we make them understand what true socialism is and how it impacts them as individuals?
I think, we've got to organise in our communities. I know there may not be places, out after the sort of pandemic, but there are means to organise. And at the moment, it might not be as easy and it might not be as visible to some communities, but, it's up to us to try and find those more alternative ways that we can include as many people. But afterwards, I think, there's going to be an awful lot of rebuilding that our communities need to do. And the only way to do that is through that organising, is listening, is, whether it be in your workplace, whether it be in, whatever sort of community that you're in. I think it's, incumbent upon all of us, not just a certain group of us within those communities, but it's incumbent upon all of us within our communities to reach out and make sure that, everybody within our community has that voice, has a way of being heard. And, it's not going to be easy. And, nobody ever said it was going to be. I think the challenges that we have ahead of us are going to be very difficult. And I think, we're going to see from that who the leaders of our community are, who are the people who, walk the walk and talk the, and don't just talk the talk, who are going to be the people that are willing to, get things back together. And I think that's the battle for all of us. It's not just in the theoretical political education, but it's actually in how we, go forward and put our theory into practice.
Dina, have you seen that in your local politics of up and coming politicians that are getting enthused and involved because of COVID? And do you see them more active out in say in our area, delivering meals and stuff for the vulnerable and all the programs that were set in place by our county? Do you see any replication there in your area?
Well, I can't really, unfortunately, I can't comment because I moved, I've temporarily moved to Edinburgh. I moved in the end of June last year, and I'm only here until the end of this year. So I've moved from where I was. I'm now in a place where I don't really know anyone. So it would be unfair to me to make a judgment on either community, because I'm not in the one that I was, nor am I known in the one that I am. But, I think, from what I see, on social media is that, it is the working class communities that are doing those more sort of mutual aid and, setting up not just food banks, but, delivering food, making sure people have been able to get prescriptions. And, I don't know whether that's just restricted to the working class, but for me, I think that, the upper class, the establishment aren't in need of that. So is that even happening in their area? I don't know, but, I don't think I can comment on a community-wide level, to be honest.
I think it revolves straight back to what Rochelle was on about earlier, in regards to my mind's just gone completely blank. But Rochelle mentioned earlier on about something that you were talking about in terms of people getting more involved locally. Just sorry.
Yeah. No, well, there is. I mean, I have to. And there's one thing that I would like to mention about where I was before, in Colchester, and it was a person who has done, is a real community champion. And when I first moved Colchester, I ended up kind of volunteering at one of the local youth clubs in one of it was in like the ward that I lived in. And there's a woman, Maureen Powell, who's in that area, who she set up, it was her idea to set up the youth club for the kids. And then she started doing sort of, like food in the school holidays. So, she was doing that for a long time before it became a thing. And then, throughout the whole of the pandemic, she has coordinated delivering food, getting, food donated, but also then delivering it to, families in need throughout Colchester. And I think, that's just like, this one, she's an absolute, legend who's masterminded this, but has done it. And she's not done it for any sort. And I think this is what's most admirable about it. And this is where so many people in our communities deserve to be, rewarded. And I don't mean rewarded in like CD or whatever like that. I just think people need to acknowledge that there are people who do this not for political gain. They don't do it for personal gain. There are so many people, and this is what I love about the working class, is that people they just love their communities, love the people, and want to make sure that everybody, that nobody is going without, and will do whatever they can, whatever in their capability to do that. And I think the fact that it's done, just for that, it is something that, there's nothing greater, is there, that someone's not doing anything for personal gain or political gain. It's just purely to make sure that somebody else is okay, is just unbelievable. And I think it comes back to what Paul was saying about patriotism. That's what we should be championing, not the waving of a flag, or, that people want to see a flag. People, that's the true nature of our communities, is that people make sure that, the person beside them is okay.
I've spoke about this like quite a lot. One of the things that really annoys me is all of this Tory contract tendering, like cronyism to their mates, all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that we did at school was, obviously schools were open, we had loads of vulnerable kids at school, and there was this gap where I'm a DT teacher. So there was this gap in the market where like the Tory government had all this money for PPE, but then the PPE was stopped and there was a backlog, and there was like a warehouse that had apparently been flown in with Turkish PPE, but it wasn't up to scratch and it couldn't pass the British standard and all this kind of stuff. And then there was like this murmur in the background of like, right, well, I've made this file, this laser cutting file, I'll share it with you. If you can develop it, then you develop it. It's not copywritten, you do what you want with it. And like, that was like the first stage of like the people looking after the people on a very basic level as well. Like, we're just talking about like you or I just thinking there's a gap. What can I do? Look into it. So then I found like this file on this DT teachers forum, like, right, I've made this file for PPE. Like, it's open for use, do what you can. And then within like a week, there'd been like 500,000 pieces of PPE made by DT teachers across the world to try and plug this gap. I mean, like at school, we had friends, like teachers, like comrades, friends. We had students that were in school. We'd set up like a socially distanced belt where like we were literally going along and like making these face masks and doing all this stuff. And we had kids taking them. We had kids who had like family members who were working in care homes and stuff. And they were literally coming to school, making something and then taking it home and giving it to their auntie or uncle who worked in the care home and wasn't given PPE. And I've never seen such an achievement from them kids, or such camaraderie from people coming together and trying to do something to, to plug the gap that this Tory government have done. And when we talk about like from the ground up, like I've never seen such an example, or I've never lived an example so well, and it's still going. Like one of our MPs, Graham Morris, had contacted us and said like, look, the big issue, they've got vendors. So these vendors are on the streets, they haven't got any PPE, they're not being given any, like, is there anything you can do? So I'd put a call out to all my friends, like comrades, DT teachers, and within a week, everyone was sending all of their face masks to the Big Issue to just like give them, like, for nothing, like, you know. And it was so bittersweet because you want, like, as a person who doesn't support the Tory government, but as a teacher who wants to help their kids, you know, feel supported and feel like they've done something really well, I'd contacted Graham and said, like, look, our school's done this thing. We've produced over like 3,000 pieces of PPE. The school has, the kids have, like, in support of this national pandemic. And we got this letter from Downing Street, and it was like bittersweet because the Labour part of us, or you know, the other part of us was like, oh God, this Tory government are congratulating me for spearheading, you know, 3,000 PPE things that we've done when we shouldn't have had to do it.
But they
And
don't know the real you, though, Rochelle.
No,
That's
no.
why.
Nor did you do it
but at
for
the same
the
time,
recognition.
at the same time, I'm like having to advertise on Facebook and things like that, because for the kids, you know, like, for children and young people to get recognition for the work that they've done, regardless of who's given the recognition, to get the recognition is something that they should have, because they did do something fantastic. And that, you know, I would never say you can't have that because it's from a Tory government. So you've got to, like, split yourself up into two people and, like.
But did you tell them that they shouldn't have needed to have done it?
Oh, they knew. That's the thing, and that's the thing
what's
about all of
amazing.
this.
Yeah.
They knew. They totally knew. They were
But
saying,
that
like, oh, I
doesn't
can't
mean-
believe we're having to do this.
But just because you shouldn't have to do it doesn't mean that you don't. But it gives you that idea, and it teaches those young people that regardless of the people in power who should have done something, that we, the people, can always do what needs to be done anyway. You know, we don't need them. And I think it's the biggest example, isn't it, of how whenever ordinary people do something, they solve the issue, and we don't need you anyway. It's kind of like that political education in practice, you know, again.
Right, I'm going to go back to the chat now because there's been plenty going on in the chat. Mark Lungley has said, a bit old, but what do you think about Gavin Williamson trying to ban books from schools that don't
I'm not going to
portray
say what I would
capitalism in a
say.
good light? So, Rochelle, you're doing a lot on social, emotional, mental... No, sorry, no, it's social, moral, and cultural. Is that the one?
Social, moral, spiritual, and cultural. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, like, as a teacher, we are now not allowed to do anything. It's not quite right. It's not banning books that don't portray capitalism in a good light. It is... if anything is seen to be anti-capitalist, it is deemed to be radicalism. So it's deemed to be radicalism and needs to be reported to prevent, because you're a terrorist. Because and the symbols around this, like, just search for the prevent symbols, and they've got, like, they decided to equate left-wing terror groups with right-wing terror groups, which they often do. They try and make this false equivalence, and they say, oh, so these left-wing terror groups, well, who are they? There's, like, I don't know, there must be someone, Greenpeace. We'll wang them in. We'll say they're a terrorist group, and we'll say St. Pauli Football Club, and we'll say the Vegan Association, because there's, like, these are things that you might see at a left-wing rally, so it's left-wing radicalism, which is basically terrorism. And on the other side, you've got, like, these 90 different symbols for neo-Nazism or actual being a Nazi. And there's this, honestly, it's in the Prevent book that these are falsely equivalent to each other. You just think, well, you know, I'm a vegan. I'm not really a Nazi. It's not the same thing. It's not the same. You can't, like, equate one with the other. Like, you know, I follow St. Pauli's football results and I think the clothes are cool. Doesn't mean the same as wanting to, like, you know, do a genocide.
Eradicate certain people, yeah.
Yeah, it's so there is a very, very weird thing going on in education. I think we should be, but Rochelle, you're our SMSC, is that right?
Yeah.
Expert, you go.
To try and explain it, is Ofsted have a set of criteria that every child should go through personal development. So personal development is trying to achieve, ironically making sure that every child has the same type of experiences despite their background, as opposed to somebody who is wealthy or is born into wealth or that type of thing. So we have this personal development overarching thing. And then within that, we have social, moral, spiritual, and cultural education. And that is meant to be like the parts of school that isn't academic, like school trips. Can they talk to one another? Have they experienced other things that isn't, like within school? And that's my job at school. So I'm head of SMSE, and my job is to make sure that all of these students, and there's one in every school, that the genuinely is like one in every school. And it's all about trying to make sure that these kids get the experiences that they're meant to have, so that they're not left behind, so that even if they come from a deprived area, they still get the opportunity to have these experiences. Now, one of the things that really annoys us is in this pandemic, one of the things that these kids genuinely need to learn, right, within SMSE or anything like that, like morally, is the internet. Some of them haven't got the internet. Some of them barely, they get a dongle from school with like a certain amount of gig on it, and they have to do that. And yet we've I'm trying to be very politically correct, but not correct at the same time. We've got other kids in other situations where they've got access to like historical educational books in their home. The libraries are shut. Like these kids who are from like a deprived area, they can't go to the library and research whatever they want to do. But then you've got other people who've got these like all of these educational books at their disposal, and it's all about like trying to close the gap and make sure that all of these kids get the same education despite their background, despite their monetary income. And it's harder than ever right now. It's really difficult. I'm trying not to rant.
Oh, just rant. It's just so much better. Gets it off your chest.
It's a tough time. We've got the comment from Paul Smith. Please tell us, John Woodcock, where these left-wing terror groups are. Laura suggested it might be a Section 28 for anti-capitalists. That's a really good point.
Sorry to interrupt. I did read one where it said from Twitter, as a teacher, do you have to be neutral or not? And the answer is you've got to be neutral in your.
You're not even being neutral though. You're not being neutral. You're actually being, you're forced to be
pro-capitalist,
protecting the establishment view. So you're not neutral. You're actually not allowed to be balanced. You're not allowed to offer balance. Is offering both sides. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to contradict the ruling, the ruling class, the ruling way of things, which is, and I think that must be really difficult, Rochelle, to be, because the whole point about teaching is about, enabling people to be critical thinkers, to be able to make up their own minds about things and learn. And, if you're not being able to present the information, how can then someone create and think about what they, what they believe of something? There's
no informed decisions because they haven't got all the information that they haven't.
I work with kids who have social, emotional, mental health issues. We've had to involve Prevent sometimes, and it wasn't because they were putting rainbow laces in the football boots, like St. Pauli do. That is what St. Pauli do. They put rainbow bands on and stuff like that. They're anti-fascist. It wasn't that reason. It was because they were reading like Nazi paraphernalia and, they were doing these things. That is what kids are being indoctrinated into. It isn't into a world that preaches tolerance. That isn't the problem. The problem isn't saying, let's all be nice to gay people. The problem is, let's all exterminate certain types of people.
Yeah. I want to know if someone has ever had to, refer someone to prevent for reading left-wing material.
We found this kid asleep reading Marx.
I was gonna make a joke and say I'll start leaving stuff on my desk, but like
There is all of a laugh about extreme left wing, but we can all name scenarios of extreme left wing if you can think about it. So not just like it put a seriousness straight onto the conversation, but you've got to think about people who want to accelerate the current situation that we're in to then be able to have some all-encompassing revolution that will be bloody, and it's exactly what they want. There are people out there that accelerationists, so they will come around and they will antagonize and cause scenarios whereby it creates instability to the point that they can incur revolution. And this is a tactic used by other adversaries around the world, whether or not you're a Western capitalist or whatever. It doesn't matter. It happens internationally, regardless. We just need to think about that term of play. That's all I'm trying to say.
I just find it, really ironic that, we're a nation that are now trying to, big up the armed forces, and that's patriotism, yet it prepares people to go into other nations and, do all sorts of things, And I just find it deeply, I don't know, think that there's an irony there in the influence that we're trying to create on society. But yet, if you're left wing, you're seen to be, just the same as someone who's,
It's only serving forces as well. If you're currently in the army, you're supposed to support them, but once they're out and the homeless on the streets, you're meant to give that up. Yeah, you're not allowed to. So when the left-wing people start to support them because they've been, made homeless, or they've got mental health issues or PTSD, all those things are evil. But not supporting them going in and doing like some sort of massacre on a village is a real negative. And I'm not saying that the all armed forces behave like that, because of course they don't. But that's the sort of things the left-wing call out, and the sort of things the left-wing call out is veterans sleeping on the streets. They shouldn't have to do it. People
nobody
with their limbs blown off and stuff, and exactly.
Nobody should sleep on the streets. And I just find this. There are a small minority of people, who want to see anarchy, but they're never going to get that. They're not as dangerous as someone who's trying to equate, the problems that we have in society with, some people who are fleeing war-torn nations and, seeking respite in a nation that, has probably caused a lot of the problems that they're running from, and they're not the same. And I think, that I can't understand. Well, I can't understand it. I just find it really absurd that it's happening, and that it's happening and people don't know it's happening. And that can be said for a lot of things that goes on, in the UK, that, and it comes back to that critical thinking. It comes back to that education, and it also comes back to the end of the political education that, and it also leads into that, are we in a democracy argument? There is so much that's going on that people are unaware of. But just carry on watching Coronation Street and talking about whether whatever character is happening to whatever character, and the real shit is going on over here, but you don't need to know that. It's, at some point we've got to break through this barrier and make people say that, no, you got to be watching over here, never mind what's going on over there. It's, and it, we're creating a generation and multi-generations of people who cannot do that because they're not being given the information to be able to critically assess things.
Speaking of, in a light-hearted way, speaking of Coronation Street, we've just confirmed Charlie Hardwick. She's going to be on next month.
I have no clue who that is.
She is someone from Coronation. I know more. I wouldn't. I recognise her. She was like on Coronation Street in Emmerdale years ago, and but she like did it for years when I wasn't watching. But I also met her through the Women's Banner group, and she's absolutely amazing. She's a proper cracking socialist. You'd recognise her face, I reckon. She's absolutely awesome. She's a good human being. She's a good. Is there anything parents can do to challenge suppression of anti-capitalist material? I suppose the only thing that you can do as a parent is
Teach them at home.
Exactly.
show them stuff at home. But
They're at
isn't that
home
like
more than they're at school.
but what does that give to someone who is maybe indoctrinated at home with far right materials? It's far more likely you're going to be a far right terrorist than a far left terrorist. We are seeing homegrown people in County Durham who have been convicted of terror offences. It's pretty scary, really. So I'm going to. I think I've had a class time and I could go on all night, but all good things must come to an end. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to play. Christine from Sweden is coming on next week. Christine, someone who I met through the Durham Miners Gala. She came over to see the Durham Miners Gala. She was completely inspired by the Corbyn project. And this is a little clip that we did outside of the interview again. And I asked her if it was okay if we put this out as an interview, like as a sort of advert for next week. She is properly lovely, and it's so interesting as well to see how people see socialism in Sweden. And I think people from the UK often think that Sweden is this like model of socialism. She doesn't necessarily agree with that, although she does say that we're a lot more socialist. And some of the things she said as well about their political education that they had within socialism was absolutely outstanding. So I'm just going to play a little bit, and it's more to do with County Durham as well. So
I think that's really something that has struck us and been very inspirational, that we've met so many people in Durham, just like ordinary people, if you use that expression, you know what I mean, like who have been so intelligent and, have a lot of experience and do amazing things. And clearly, of course, it's not like, that, the political education is perfect. I realize it's not, because if it was, maybe Keir Starmer wouldn't be the leader of the Labour Party now. But I still think there's something about letting the more like ordinary voices be heard, and also what kind of people. That was also actually a difference I could have mentioned before, like the difference between the Swedish Labour movement and your Labour movement is that you also have representatives from a working class background who are not trying to be something else, like Laura Pidcock, for example, or Dennis Skinner, people who are proud of being working class and sort of speaking for the working class. And I think that's also a big difference. Like they're not trying to sound like the regular politicians. And listening to someone like John Dunn on this Castaway episode yesterday, I was just sat there thinking, like, he could be prime minister, and it's not. Yeah, do you know what I mean? I think it's a really good thing.
So again, I didn't clip off that little noise at the end, but yeah. So it's interesting to see like what she admits herself that she almost romanticized the idea of what was going on because she saw the Durham Miners Gala. She really saw the best of us, I think, in the best of the Corbyn movement when Jeremy Corbyn came to do the speeches, and that's how I met Christine. And she was actually someone who's been asked to stand as an MP. She's really well respected. She's she's someone who I respect a lot, but she has this connection with the northeast of England because she did a big piece of work on a strike that they did in Sweden, which was the first one against what you would call like sort of a Labour government. It's like they're Social Democrats, I think they're called. So yeah, it's a really interesting interview. But has anyone got any comments on what Christine said there?
I think it's very interesting that you highlighted two MPs that got deselected in the latest elections, to be honest. Although I very much agree with her. They were very figureheads of the working class movement in British culture. I do agree with that. And I think it's baked in with my principles as well. They were people who I looked up to. I looked up to Laura. It was devastating the night that she lost our election in County Durham, and then we have the balls over champion as usual, doing his usual thing. But I just think last election was in the UK. That is a very big defeat in terms of who they targeted for them defeats. There were specific constituencies that they did target to bring down particular people. They use some weird tactics, if you look into it, into the areas and the constituencies to be able to get to that point. Other than that, I think we need more working class people like that. There was a post earlier on I seen on social media which highlighted himself for balls over. When he was speaking at the gala and had Black Hole Banner in the background, actually it was Rob Crude. And so we need more people like this, people who actually speak up for the working class. They're not shy of it anymore. They lived it. They need to be important. In MPs these days, they need to think about that. They need to come from these backgrounds. There's a lot of disassociation between people who make the decisions for society and people who live in society. There's a big disassociation there. And I haven't seen that many MPs nowadays that, other than the ones that were mentioned, Jeremy Corbyn was a big part of it. Locally, we have Graham Morris, etc. But in other areas, there's just not enough of us that have that background of the working class culture. They have the full understanding of what's going on. They're not disassociated of what's being said on the street. Brexit, for a big example, for in our area, Graham knew every single little ounce of what was going on in that conversation because he was getting thrown on it in every meeting. He was getting shouted at people in the streets, like that type of thing. The disassociation between people who are making the decisions and the people who are living in the society there needs some coherence, and I don't think we've had that in politics for as long as I was alive anyway.
Yeah, but I think though that we can get sort of caught up in this notion of people having to be working class, because I could then say, well, there are a lot of people that are working class, and unfortunately there are, who don't look for the benefit or want to represent the needs of their community. So you look at people like Wes Streeting, who loves to flaunt the fact, that he's come from a working class background. There are some Tory MPs who come from working class backgrounds. I think, for me, that it's not necessarily, I come from a working class background and I'm proud of that fact. And I would never, work to, not represent the class that I come from. And I think that I would work to represent everybody anyway. But the issue for me is that whether you understand the needs of your community and whether, that's what you're truly there for, because you might even understand the needs of your community, but you might just be there for yourself, which is what I would say Wes Streeting is all about. He's not there about the advancement of the working class. He's there for the advancement of Wes Streeting, end of story, and he doesn't care who he's going to trample on, and how he does that. But, what we have to be looking at are people that are, yes, it's great if you're from the working class, but what's your motivation? What's your politics? That's what I want to be looking at. And you look at someone like Tony Benn, who was certainly not, working class, but completely grasped, what it was to have that politics and what the politics was to be able to advance, socialism. And, and he didn't come to that straight away. He came to that throughout his, career. And I think, we can rule out people who can and I hate to say this, go on a journey, but some people do go on that journey, you know, and as socialists, you know, we believe that people can come on that journey and change and you know, get into that way of politics. I think for us, you know, what we have to be looking at is, you know, yes, it would be great that, you know, our representatives come from our class, but I want to look at what someone's politics are. And, you know, I think we can, you know, there's an awful lot of people in our class who are there to further their own agenda and who will quite gladly bang the drum of the working class and then get on their little soapbox and then off they go. They're, you know, they're on their way, and, you know, that's it. I.e. Angela Rayner, you know, who a lot of people got fooled by, and a lot of people think, you know, oh, she's the champion of the working class, you know, and she's not. And I think that's a lesson. And I think this is where we have to look at what someone's, you know, let's get to, and I think, you know, I've said this a couple of times. I think that, you know, unfortunately, the era of Jeremy has misled some people, because Jeremy was someone you could take at his word. Jeremy, I can remember, was a steward actually at the event in Newcastle when he came to speak in 2015 during the leadership rally. And, you know, Jeremy spoke our language. Jeremy spoke about the issues that we were all facing. I think there are some people who have, you know, the superficiality of that, they're able to stand on a stage and they're able to tell us what we want to hear, but really their motivation isn't that. And I think it comes back to that whole political education, that critical thinking, that ability to be able to see when we're being played. And I think that, you know, we've got a lot of learning to do. And I think, you know, people always get caught out anyway. My dad has this saying, you know, I remember growing up, and he always says, long runs the fox. You know, they get caught in the end, you know, and there's some people I'm so glad to have got caught, and Angela Rayner's one of them.
One of the things that I particularly found hilarious was there's this group that's operating in the Northeast, and they call themselves the Blue Collar Tories, and they're throughout the North, and they call themselves Blue Collar Tories. And like Paul Howell, who has more properties, he's like the MP for Sedgefield. He's got more properties than anyone in Parliament. He's got 16 properties that we know of that are in his name. I'm sure they could be in his wife's name and what have you. And he was an accountant throughout his entire life, and he describes himself as a blue collar Tory. Hello, my father had a diamond mine in Africa. Now, how can I be racist if those people in Africa were working for my father in his diamond mine? And that's why I consider myself a blue-collar Tory. It's just like, it's so ridiculous, and yet,
But it's also as ridiculous as people like Paul Embry, you know, and the likes, you know, who use their working class background to become, you know, and put that wedge within communities. And there's so much I want to say, but we're live, so I'm not going to say.
I think I just did my Tory impression live, so
I'm not going into my description of Paul Embry live.
One of the things, one of my friends, when I told him I was going to like try and run as a Durham County Council councillor, and he'd said like, "Well, what's your agenda?" And I was like, "Oh, what do you mean?" And he was like, "Well, what's your agenda? Every politician's got an agenda." And I was like, "Well," and I'd said like, "Well, what I want to do is encourage like political education within or outside of school, like try and find that gap, or, you know." And I told him me bigger picture of like what I wanted to do. And he was like, "Yeah, well, but what's," you know, like through like slanty eyes, he was like, "Well, what's your hidden agenda?" And I was like, "Well, I don't have one. Like, I don't." And I, you know what I thought really strange? Not that I had to try and answer those questions, because I presumed that those questions were going to come, but that they were coming from someone who I'd known for ages. And I thought, honestly, one of the biggest drawbacks for me, like putting myself up for this sort of job, if you will, was like, I hope that the people that know us genuinely know that I'm doing it for, you know, like not the right reasons, but like I just want to do what I've said that I'm going to do, and I don't, you know, wish to have £2 million in
Yeah.
weird
there's no
contracts,
hidden agenda
like behind the back. And I just thought, like, what honestly, one of my biggest things for me was like, am I prepared for people that I love dearly to treat me differently because I'm in politics? And it's this thing of like,
yours is so lovely in comparison to mine, because like you've got like, are people going to think that I'm doing the right thing? I went home to, you know, Northern Ireland whenever I got selected as a parliamentary candidate, and I was like, didn't really think about, you know, what people would think. But I didn't get the, you know, will you be, you know, will this change you as a person? I literally got my, you know, people I'd grown up with, people I'd known in the pub. I went out on a Friday night, and they literally, you know, were like, oh, what are you doing now? And be like, oh, X, Y, and Z. Oh, I got selected to be a parliamentary candidate. And people were literally pissing themselves in my face. And I'm like, you've got selected to run as an MP. You know, there was none of this, will you be corrupted? And she was like, oh my God, it's you. And they were just like, I would never be corrupted, because they're like, Jesus.
It's brilliant. Sometimes the comments can bring you right down to earth. So I'm going to come back to a really good comment a second, but we've had an absolute belter there. What are you all talking about? We've gone down a little hole, haven't we? We've started talking. Yeah, we started talking about you know, a variety of different things, and you know, you it's one of those things where you had to be there, but you are, so it's really difficult to explain. But yeah, so
James doesn't know.
Wait, what's going on?
Yeah, someone said, what are you all talking about? So
I heard that
I'm
in
gonna
the background, by the way, just saying.
I'm gonna do a quick comment from Mia, who's absolutely brilliant, and we all think Mia's great. So I heard Richard Holden's upset a lot of his constituents in his short time of office. I'm sure Durham Northwest will swing back to Labour at the next election. Well, hopefully. I think it will. We would hope so, and we'd hope that Laura Pidcock would stand there, because Richard Holden is another of the working class Tories who's worked in. He worked as a spad, you know, and spads are very working blue collar, you see.
Paul, I think you pass yourself off quite well as being a blue collar Tory.
Yeah, didn't he start taking photographs of his meals and stuff in the middle of like the food bank stuff? What was going on at the time?
Yeah. He's generally just a dreadful person.
Yeah, bad timing is all I'm saying.
I always say, if you want to class yourself as blue collar, do you have a shower before work or after work? And if you have a shower after work, then maybe you can consider yourself blue collar, because if you need to shower after work, then self-explanatory, really. Yeah. Laura's claiming I'm a thesp. Yeah, theatre actor.
Yeah, definitely. I'll
I can see it.
I treaded the boards in a number of school productions as a teacher. So yeah. Fayetteville Sykes. Oh, Leanne Powell, if only you'd done the Hal Draper reading in that voice, that would have... Yeah, maybe next time, eh? Maybe next time. And another...
James Connolly one would have been even better.
James Connolly. Someone suggested a shower during work. I've had a shower during work as well. You know, it's one of the...
I do at the gym sometimes. By the way, I'll go to the gym and then have a shower afterwards, and at the middle of work at lunchtime.
Yeah,
for you.
I've had to have a shower during work.
Facilities, to be honest.
Can I just throw it in that I prefer to have a bath?
And everything.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Each to their own. But yeah, shower during work. If you ever had to have a shower during work, it's sometimes there's plenty of professions where you'd need to have a shower during work. I'd say they probably.
Let's not go down that road, Paul.
I would class them blue collar. So and another one from Mia regarding Tina's point. She's against all women and all anything shortlists about candidate politics and who's the best person for the job. Now this is an interesting one. All woman shortlists. Personally, me and Laura spoke about this a lot. You know about these, so you go for this one, Tina. I'm going to come in a bit
Well,
don't mind.
I actually got selected on being an all-women shortlist, and in the ideal world, we shouldn't need to have all-women shortlists, but because of the way that politics is usually, outnumbered by men, and men have been able to be in a position to be able to stand for office, we have to try and get more women into politics. I would like to say, probably because I've had a few drinks now, that regardless of whether it had been an all-women shortlist or not, I would have won anyway, because it comes down to your politics. And I don't think, for me that, like I say, I think, we shouldn't need to have all-women shortlists. We shouldn't need to have short lists of anything, but we are in a world where men have dominated nearly everything, and to be able to get into a place where men don't dominate, we need to allow for more people, whether you're a woman, whether you're LGBT, whether you're disabled. We need to be able to get more people to make it more representative of the people that we have in our nation. It isn't a majority men, so we do need to get more representation. So, I'm not just defending that because I won on an all women shortlist. I just think that we have to be realistic about how we get to a state where we have a better representation of the nation in front of us.
I was going to say exactly what Laura's just put on the screen. Actually, we shouldn't need them, but we do. They serve a purpose. However, this is the discussion we've had a lot. They do nothing to remove the barriers stand in the way of many women, especially working class women, getting involved. So they're a stick and plaster over a systemic issue. So what we've often talked about is when you've got an all-woman shortlist, what it often does is provide people who are women without the barriers that women face the opportunity to stand in those elections. So is that helping the representation of young mothers? Is that or single mothers or people who are overlooked for a variety of different reasons relating to women? Does that remove a barrier? I don't know whether it does.
I think it depends, right? If you look at it, what are we looking at it in terms of, standing for office within Labour? Is this what, are we looking at it in that one frame? Because I think it has to then come to how the organisation helps to enable people to become involved in that organisation. So as we know, if you're going to stand for office, the chances of you getting it selected are your capability to be able to be involved in that organization. What have you been doing to, further the cause, and what will you do? And I think that shouldn't necessarily be a barrier, but whether the organization that you're going to represent is then going to help you and facilitate your capability to be able to do that. And I think I can talk about that as well as a working class woman who stood as a parliamentary candidate. It was really financially difficult. I ended up having to give up my job to be able to do this properly. And, for the first year, just over a year, I still did a full-time job, and I commuted. It was 2 hours to work and 2 hours back, and it was absolutely unbelievably difficult. It took a strain on my physical health. It took a strain on my mental health. And I was lucky because I didn't have children, so for me, it's not just about the whether it was an all-women shortlist as an entity in itself. It needed to have a structure around it to be able to support me as a working class woman, and me as whether, I had children as well. So no, as a thing on its own, it doesn't just help. It's a tick box exercise. But it's, we still have to look at how we manage to get more people, into organizations. But I think, you've got, it's kind of like whether you can get socialism tomorrow or whether you get it, whether, you have to build towards it. You've got to try and do what you can to get it. But at the same time, it's not going to be perfect in being able to do that, as a thing in itself.
I think at one point, what socialist think tanks should do, if we ever like got to the point where we're not spending all our own money on doing all this stuff, if we ever like got something, that could be something we'd look into, like standing and helping working class candidates do this, you know, and be able to stand for parliament. Because how many people do you get who are genuinely working class who stand for parliament? You know, and I don't think parliament's the be all and end all by any stretch of the
it's not,
imagination. But people
I
are
think-
excluded from it
yeah.
because if they need to work, you can't do it.
But that's where having, and this is, you know, like the whole platform of me standing was about, you know, creating a vibrant, you know, body of people who were going to be active in their area. So it wasn't just reliant on one person, and it never should be, whether you're a councillor, whether you're a parish councillor, whatever you know, representative you are, you know, if we're talking about the Labour Party, you know, that you should have a team of people that are, it's not about the one person. It's not about an empire. It's not about someone being, oh, you know, you're seen to, you know, like we had councillors in our area who it was all about that one councillor. It should never be about that. It should be about what Labour, you know, when you wear that Labour rosette, you're not wearing your own rosette, you're wearing the Labour Party rosette. So it should be a collective of people who are working in their community, who, regardless of whatever the face is, that people realise that's the Labour Party. You're privileged to be able to be the person to have that rosette on and to have that opportunity to be the one representative. But as a total, it should be a group thing. It should be, you know, a lot of people willing to do it. And I think that's where, you know, we're struggling at the moment because of the leadership and the way that they've, you know, gone down that route. You know, they've excluded so many people who would be very active within their area. So I think we've gone backwards. I think we've gone backwards by a long shot.
My personal take on what we need and what has been missing for a long time, there is no real, let's call it, engine of professionalism behind candidates that get proposed by Labour anymore. It used to be behind the unions, where there was a hell of a lot of unions, a lot of money behind the unions to be able to support all of the candidates. Yes, there is still all of that, just not to the degree it used to be. So with technological advancements, as I was talking about earlier, for stuff like social media and online, especially now with COVID, etc., there is hardly any engine behind all of that aspect of it. The PR, let's call it, the something like a leadership team would have, if you know what I mean, where there would be a team of 4 or 5 people behind them, and you don't see that very much anymore. You see it a little bit with certain MPs when you get the right connection of people to be able to accelerate it, but you don't see it throughout the party, and talking specifically the Labour Party at the moment. To be able to like advance that online and the way I see it is what we need to do really is change the space of conversation. So the Tories for a long time have actually manipulated the conversation in such a way that it's to their battleground. And what we need to do, and we've always been lagging behind that technologically, it's specifically technologically, our institutions in the Labour Party are not keeping up with this. This is the problem. And a lot of the time, I think what we need to do is get on top of that now and then switch it to our advantage, whereby we create and solidify multiple streams of channels of information, so we're not bound to media channels and stuff. And that's my personal ambition of what I've been trying to do for a long time, is put people to people, put them to the right people. It's not about creating that division. It's just making sure that your voice is heard just as much as everybody else's is, and making sure that each individual voice is heard. It takes a long time to do that because it's a societal change.
Yeah.
But I think within the Labour Party, they could help that by creating little teams like what we have now, the 3 to 4 to 5 people, and then get an engine behind each constituency and say, right, they're your focus. They're going to literally produce this, that, and the other, and hire them. For example, they need to be paid. They need to be full-time, because it is a full-time job. I can tell you that from my experience. Just to be able to churn out work, because at the moment what we've got is like Labour North. Labour North is a very small team for what it needs to be able to do, and all of its responsibilities was a team of like 4 or 5 people in Labour North. That's just not enough for the low capacity and the electioneering that they need to do.
Yeah.
So they revolve heavily on like union help and voluntary work and all of that type of stuff. I just don't think this is feasible. We need to think of something proper around this, of how to be able to get our communication back into the community in a new way, in a way that we've never thought before, because the way what we're doing it now is dying out, and we need to think of a new way to do it.
Right, I'm gonna start making the wrap up now. So I'm gonna come to Rochelle first. After I do a couple of comments here, Laura said, like, basically agreeing that they should stump up the cash for working class women who can't afford the train fare. Not to mention the campaign materials. These are the things, like, it costs you money to campaign within the Labour Party at all before you get to the point. And yeah, you know, there's money there that they're spending on different things, and maybe they could save money by moving outside of London. Maybe there are all sorts of different things they could do. Do Conservatives have an all-women shortlist? Surely it's a Labour conversation. Yeah, they don't have all-women shortlists, the Conservatives, but they do pick people based upon certain groups. But they'll always pick the person who is like, you know, oh, now we've got a person from this minority and this minority and this minority, and therefore they speak for all of them, when it's like not how it works. Leanne Powell said it's like being down the pub. Absolutely brilliant, but she's having a herbal tea instead of a pint. We aren't drinking herbal tea. And Mark Lungley says that prospective parliamentary candidates need a bursary for the Shaw campaign, and a month before it starts, so they can give up the jobs or take unpaid leave or whatever. There definitely needs to be something there. Mia Mantry, she agrees with having better representation. It's more about the issue, how the issue is addressed. She would have voted for Mary Foy regardless, because she agrees with her politics. So, you know, like, that's another thing as well. There's so many brilliant women in the campaign that we'd probably vote for anyway. You know, so you don't necessarily need an all-women shortlist, which is what you were saying as well, Tina. Okay, so let's go around. Rochelle, any closing comments?
With regard to talking about like monetary values and bursaries and all that kind of stuff, I think that if anything, this pandemic has taught us that we can do a lot of things remotely, and I would hope that that was something that they could like endeavour to improve in the future, so that the people up north especially, and by north I mean like up over of Manchester and Liverpool, there could be MPs and they could deliver whatever they needed to deliver like online without having to spend all the money to be there in person, because you can still deliver the same message. We've seen it on like question time, all that kind of stuff. And I do think that's like, although this has been a horrendous time, some good things have come out of it, and that's one of them. Like monetary is taken away from that.
Cool. James?
Don't have many closing comments other than as usual, tonight has been full of different opinions, and it has been for me a wide open experience as usual. Thank you for Tina for coming on. Thank you for Rochelle for the usual comments, and Paul for his thoughtful insights. The only thing I would say is if you really like what you see, please do share, like, subscribe, all that type of stuff. And if you've got time, go visit the website, look at the schedule, see what's coming up, because we've got loads on. It's not just this. And we've got plenty of guests, and hopefully to have many more, like just like yourself, Tina, come back on hopefully at one point. And yeah, that's my closing comments.
Cheers, James. Tina?
I would just say, stop with the flags, give me the politics, and if you want political education, there's some on tomorrow. So look for the political education project and get started. And yeah, Yeah, come back. I'll definitely come back to this if you'll have me.
Right, it's great, isn't it? I've really enjoyed it. So, in my closing comments would be just try and support socialist social media, and all types of media, to do with the socialist project. We're not going to win it on our own, are we? You know, like you're not going to get the Guardian putting out a nice article about how things could be under socialism. So it's a privilege to be involved with everyone. Thank you everyone for coming on. Thank you for absolutely everyone who's commented, everyone who's watched without commenting. It's really appreciated. One of the massive things you can do, as James was saying, is to share things, tell other people about it. That's the way you share. It's like the social media word of mouth, isn't it? Sharing things and liking and commenting, because it does make a massive difference. Adam Peters is someone who's commented a lot really positively tonight, and I should have mentioned, but didn't, because there were so many good conversations going on while his things were coming up, and I was like, I really must mention Adam. So thank you, Adam. Thank you. I think I've mentioned nearly everyone else personally, but one of the beauties of this is just being able to interact with you. This kind of show is about talking to you live. We are live, like we're a few seconds behind, but we do see what you're saying. Every single person on here is seeing what you're saying. So please do like, share, and subscribe if you want to. We don't expect this, but if you wanted to donate something to Socialist Think Tank, it would really help. I hate when other people spend the first 5 minutes of every show saying that. You can donate to Socialist Think Tank, and some people are, and we're so grateful. And all that does is cover our costs, because they are starting to mount up a little bit. But we will continue to do what we're doing, and we hope that you have a lovely night. Thank you for spending it with us, regardless of how you've done that, whether you've listened again or whether you've whether you've been with us all the way through. We really appreciate it. So I will look for something to say bye-bye and
Bye-bye.
take care. See you later.